Well, hey there, guys. It's Corinna from My Digital Farmer out here in Elmore, Ohio. I just got back from the grocery store. I was making a run for groceries at Meijer, which is one of our grocery stores out here in Ohio. And something happened there that made me think of marketing and actually made me think about the surprise and delight factor that I talk about in this week's podcast episode. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to hop on and I'm going to talk about it with you guys because it was just a perfect example of how a brand was able to, at some point in my journey with them, create a surprise and delight moment. So at Meijer grocery store, there is a mechanical toy after the checkout section. It's a horse called Sandy, and you stick your child on it and you put the little, the coin in the slot and it starts to ride. And the kid just, your son or daughter sits on there and it rides for about 30 seconds and then it's over. Okay, this particular horse, mechanical horse, is at every single Meijer grocery store, at least that I've ever been in. There's only one Sandy in every store, but there is a Sandy. And here is the thing. Sandy only costs 1 penny to ride. And I obviously don't use Sandy anymore with my children because they are now 8 and 11 years old. But when I was a new mom and I had to bring my kids to the grocery store because, I had to get stuff, they came wherever I went, I chose Meijer because of Sandy. I went there because Sandy was an experience that I could give to my children. It was almost like the carrot that I could dangle in front of my kids and say, if you're good and we listen, I'll let you ride on Sandy at the end. And there were a couple of times where I didn't let them ride on Sandy because they weren't good. But for the most part, my kids always got to take a ride on Sandy. And it didn't cost me a thing. So it was an easy way for me to reward my kids. All right, so when I was in the grocery store today, I was checking out, was by myself, my kids are in school, but I saw Sandy and I thought, wow, I haven't put my kids on Sandy in years. And it made me think about how that used to be a thing, like that was a destination, a part of the Meijer grocery shopping experience. And frankly, it was the reason that I ended up going to Meijer again and again, because no other store had a Sandy, no other store had this reward baked into their operation that would help me as a mom keep control of my kids. And I thought of today's episode, well, not today's, this week I have a podcast episode that's all about how to surprise and delight your customers, and that it's really helpful if you as a brand can identify one or two places in your business, if you can build a mechanism into your operation so that your customer has an unexpected surprise and delight moment when they shop with you, when they experience some kind of transaction with you. And I feel like the Sandy experience at Meijer is a great example of that. Another thing that Meijer does is they give out free cookies to any kid who shops. And when I found that out, that became a second stop every time we were at Meijer. So it was like we would first arrive, I would shop a little bit. When the kids got restless, I would go to the bakery section, get their cookie, then they would snack on that for a while. We would go visit the fish, and that was like the second place. And then the final stop was Sandy. All right, now you might be laughing, but these are probably things that were decided upon by Meijer grocery store because they knew that some of their target audience were moms like me who just needed help getting through that grocery store experience. Speaking of grocery stores, there's another, I think it's Kroger, has these shopping carts that they're huge and they have like a car so you can stick your kids into them so they feel like they're driving the car. Do you know what I'm talking about? And then you can just get around and get your stuff and you don't have to worry, they're entertained. That's another example of a reason why someone might decide to go to that store because they've got those cars to help the moms out, okay? This becomes a talk trigger, something that you can then, as a customer, talk about in relation to that brand, and now other people find out about your brand. Now, I'm not saying that you should go and create a shopping cart or, a mechanical horse at your farm. But what we do want to think about is what are specific mechanisms that we can build into our business that fire automatically when certain things happen so that our customers are surprised and delighted, or so that there's some kind of moment that maybe isn't expected that becomes a memory, and they then share that because it's different, right? It's a little sensational. It's not the norm, and so it becomes a talk trigger. I want to share one more example of this. I talk about this a little bit on the podcast episode, but I don't really go into detail. We recently had a chef, a big time, probably the best chef in the Toledo area. We have a great relationship with him, and he comes out to our farm twice a year and does private dinners, basically like a chef's table seating in our fields. So there's only 12 to 14 guests that come, and from 6 to 9:30ish, they get to sit in our fields and experience time with Chef Nixon from Element 112. And he brings just 2 other guys with them. He's literally 5 feet away. He's cooking the meal, plating the meal right in front of them. And our guests have a chance to talk not only to their farmers in a very intimate setting and get our full attention, but more importantly, they get to talk with Chef Nixon in a very unique experience. Okay, so this happened a couple of times this season, and on the second dinner, Chef Nixon actually sat down at the end of the night when we were done eating. He could have just closed up shop and started cleaning up, but he sat down with our guests and for about 30 minutes was just sharing about his business and his leadership style and some of the things that he's done, his secret sauce, like why he's so successful in his business. And everyone that was around that table happens to be what I would call a level 5 leader. Like they were really not only just foodies, but they happened to be like CEOs or just really capable individuals. And so it's almost like he knew his crowd, and he started talking with them about leadership and management. And it was this workshop, like all of a sudden they're getting this great teaching tutorial from someone who is already a great CEO and a great manager and a great creative mind. And that was a moment I could probably never have choreographed, but it became something so special about that event. It was a bonus that the people never expected to get. And they walked away thinking, wow, I'll never forget that night, because not only did I get an amazing experience with the food itself, but I got to talk to the chef in a way that probably no one ever gets to. And that became a talk trigger. That was a memory that will be forever solidified in their mind. You guys, what kinds of memories are you creating? Remember, you are a guide for your customer through your brand, and you have the power to craft an experience and a memory that they will never forget. And that's what a surprise and delight moment is. I talk about that in detail in the podcast, episode 30 this week. It's a really good episode, and I give you lots of examples of what that could look like for a farm business. So I really encourage you to go take a listen to that, because you're not only going to kind of get a framework, but you're going to see a lot of good examples. Now, one of the things that Chef Nixon talked about with us during that little chat was actually this idea kind of talk triggers. He didn't call it that, but I think he charges it's about $175 a person to go and eat at his restaurant. Okay, this is a very elite clientele. And he creates these dishes that are experiences. Let me give you an example of some of his dishes. He has something that comes out onto a plate. They're almost like mini platings, okay? So a person will get 6 or 7 of these mini platings over the course of the night. And one of them comes in a treasure chest. So there's this plate. It's not even a round plate. It's a weird looking platter. And then on it is this treasure chest kind of compartment thing. And you open it. And when you open it, smoke comes out. And then there are these little nuggets inside that look like treasure, and you bite on them and it's, a sensational taste. But you're eating out of a treasure chest, okay? So that particular dish is in and of itself a talk trigger, because now you've just created this unforgettable moment as a chef for people at the table. And they suddenly start talking about the dish itself, how unusual it is, how cool it is, and hopefully it's also tasty, which it happens to be. I know it is. So now a person's going to leave that restaurant and they're going to talk about the treasure chest dish okay? You've just created a moment, an experience at that farm, or excuse me, at that restaurant that's going to allow your customer to go and be your marketing tool for you. They're going to talk about that because it's so neat. And he has several other dishes like that. He has one that looks like a sculpture garden. It's just so cool. I mean, he is an artist. He's doing unusual things, not what you would expect a typical plate to look like, okay? And that becomes the talk trigger. So he talked in his little tutorial with us. He was like, I am in the business of creating food memories, food experiences. So somebody has a moment like that with me, they'll never forget it, and they'll want to come back and repeat it again and again, or they'll want to bring a friend and give the gift of that experience to their friend, see their reaction, and so it just compounds and keeps growing. All right, so that's a great example of a talk trigger for a restaurant, but what does it look like for us? What does it look like for a farm? And I bet that you already have some talk triggers, but you may not have identified them, or maybe you're not even really leveraging them. When I thought about this some more this week for us, I realized that we have like a product, we have our carrots that people absolutely love for whatever reason. They just think they're amazing. And we actually named them something. We named them crack carrots. I don't know if that was a good decision. Actually, it has been a good decision. But we had a customer call them that once because they said they're so addicting, they're like crack. And so we put it on a sign one week, crack carrots, and now everyone's like, why is it crack carrots? And then it gives us a story to tell. We're like, well, we have some customers who think they're really addicting, and so we just thought it would be funny to call them crack carrots. Okay, the name of the product itself has now created a talk trigger. It gives us something to talk about. And people love the crack carrots. So whenever they see the carrots on an Instagram shop or in Facebook, or, we actually had a carrot failure for a few weeks this year, and people were devastated. They were asking, where are they? Where are they? Well, now they're back. We have our final crop of the season, and people are going nuts about the carrots. So I was thinking this week, I'm like, man, the crack carrots are a talk trigger for our brand. So sometimes it's just a product, but it can also be other things. It can be mechanisms that you've built into your business, into the process of the customer journey that fire automatically when your customer does X or Y. And it causes the customer to be amazed and wowed and surprised and delighted because they weren't expecting that particular thing to happen. Okay, so I want you to go and listen to this podcast because I think it's going to really help you see some things that you could be doing fairly easily, adding on into your business that are going to create powerful experiences and memories for your current customer base. And when you give your customer base those kinds of moments, guess what happens? They become loyal to you. And I believe that having talk triggers baked into your business, having surprise and delight moments for your customers that you currently have is one of the keys to getting customer retention rates higher. So this week, I want you to make sure you listen to episode 30 of the My Digital Farmer podcast. It's a good one. I think it's probably one of the better ones I've put out there. And it's short, it's 20 minutes. I think you're gonna get a lot to think about here over the next few weeks in your off season. There's also a really good book that kind of inspired that podcast episode back when I recorded it a few weeks ago. It's called Talk Triggers by Jay Baer. And so I recommend that book to you. Go check that out at the library or purchase it on Amazon. Because it's got a lot of other great ideas from other businesses around the world, and those might spark you as well. Okay? All right, thanks so much for joining me today, and don't forget to check out my podcast, episode 30 of the My Digital Farmer podcast. I'll catch you guys next week. Bye.